141. Nihilism. Chalcedon Report number 84, August 1st, 1972. One of the telling aspects of life and thought in old Russia was the rise and prevalence of nihilism. The history of nihilism as a movement and a philosophy competing with populism, Marxism, and other movements is an important one. But, even more important, nihilism was a mood and an outlook which infected more than those who called themselves nihilists. The philosophical nihilists bowed to no authority and accepted no doctrine unless proven to their satisfaction. They were the fathers of anarchism. Bakunin, the great nihilist, was an atheist who called for the abolition of church, state, marriage and the family, and private property. His thesis was, "Be ready to die and ready to kill anyone who opposes the triumph of your revolt." Very quickly, however, it became apparent that the nihilist anarchist youth were persons, as one of their number frankly stated, who had a psychological unfitness for any peaceful work. As a matter of fact, the anarchist Boris Savinkov made it as a test of membership that only those psychologically unable to engage in peaceful work should enter the terrorist field, and that, in general, one should not make the decision hastily. Boris Savinkov, Memoirs of a Terrorist, New York, New York, Albert and Charles Boney, 1931, pages 13, 77, and 85. The nihilistic temperament was thus one of an apocalyptic love of destruction and an inability to work. It was a hatred of everything in the world at hand, and a lust to kill, maim, and destroy as a means to peace and freedom. The only joy was in cynicism and destruction, and activities were strongly suicidal. No laws were recognized beyond their own will and desires. As Lida, by no means a philosophical anarchist, observed to herself in Mikhail Archibashev's novel of the early 20th century Russia, Janine, she had a right to do whatever she chose with her strong, beautiful body that belonged to her alone. The contemporary advocates of abortion hold to a similar faith. Without being philosophically self-conscious, they have absorbed the same nihilism with the same corrosive effects. Earlier than in Archibashev, who favoured the new mood, Dostoevsky had bitterly attacked the same temper and its socialistic, anarchistic expressions, especially in his novel The Possessed or The Devils. This nihilistic mood in the people at large made the Russian Revolution possible. The socialists and communists were a very small minority. Success would have been impossible had not the widespread popular nihilism made for a ready acceptance of destruction. Today, a similar mood infects Soviet Russia's intellectuals and students. Petr Sadetsky's Oktobriana and the Russian Underground, New York, New York, Harper and Row, 1971, gives us a vivid and documented glimpse of this present-day nihilism. The communist leaders fear and hate this temper and recognize its danger. They maintain the false face of a happy Puritanism in their empire, when the reality is a bitter and unhappy nihilism. Sadetsky quotes one youth as saying that they indulge in no assassinations and no revolutions. Or even milder than Gandhi, we don't even indulge in passive resistance. The words of Lermontov are again the words of youth. All are alien to me, and I to all. They believe in nothing, past, present, or future. Immorality, perversion, orgies, and insanity are their protest. As one girl remarked, life is an absurd torment anyway. We must simply get to the end of it, as pleasantly as possible, whatever it costs. There's nothing to be done about it. There is a suicidal retreat from and hatred of reality. The idea that communism is the saviour of mankind and the architect of a better world, one from which oppression, exploitation and misery are forever excluded, is viewed with contempt and cynicism. The new nihilists of the Russian Empire are the children of communism, and the true underground movement is the underground church, of which the Reverend Richard Wurmbrand has kept the Western world informed. The new nihilists are sufficiently numerous so that production lags in the Soviet Union because nihilists are not psychologically suited for peaceful, productive work. The new nihilists make the older nihilists look like optimists by comparison. Artsabashev's hero Sanin did believe that a revolution offered hope. The modern nihilist has no hope. Throughout the world, in varying degrees, the nihilistic temper is widely present. It is not as hopeless as the Russian variety, and is more destructive, as was the pre-1917 temper, but it is still nihilism. In travelling to many colleges and universities, I have found in secular and religious schools alike a widespread belief that mankind has no hope unless a total destruction works a clean sweep. More than a few students from good middle-class conservative homes have assured me that in 20 years, people will be dropping dead everywhere from pollution and overpopulation, and the only hope is a massive revolutionary violence to stop the establishment in its tracks. After that, what? Here they grow vague. The basic impetus is a lust for nihilistic violence and destruction. But there is a difference. Increasingly, the new nihilism is directed against the doctrine of salvation by the state. The older nihilism was directed against Christendom. Now the bastions of liberalism and socialism are attacked. Why, ask bewildered adults, do they attack the Liberal Bank of America, the leftist universities, and a socialistic establishment? They attack it because it represents failure, frustration, and evil to them. Their contempt for Christendom is real, but the great enemy for nihilism today is the state and its gospel of salvation. They despair of and despise parliamentary government, but they also are cynical of Russia's dictatorship of the proletariat. There was a time when, under the influence of the Enlightenment, the words priest and pastor meant deceiver. Man's hope was in the state and its plan of salvation by the rational actions of political man. Now the word politician gets the same unreasoning hatred that the word priest and preacher once aroused, and the same slander is applied to the new scapegoats of society. The nihilists believe in nothing except destruction and the apocalyptic value of destruction. By destroying, they hope somehow to bring in a paradise in which all dreams are suddenly realized. The new nihilists of Soviet Russia, despite all their nihilistic pacifism and contempt for life, still can write about the one salvation, the horizon. The longing for the horizon and what is waiting beyond it. Octobriana, page 75. This is a fantasy-oriented perspective, as is all nihilism. The nihilist denies reality and seeks to destroy it in the name of fantasy. For youth today, the hated reality is the state and its allies who together make up the, quote, establishment, end quote. The state drafts youth into warfare. The state is a new god whose thou shalt not confront rebellious youth at every turn. The state and the family represent authority, and nihilistic youth is at war with authority. An Air Force officer has reported to us that one of the principal manifestations of psychological disorders encountered in the service is father hatred. To be under authority, to be indebted to any man or institution, is, for would-be gods, the ultimate in indignity. The state has become the target of most of this hostility, and the state has only succeeded, with all its efforts, in creating more hostility. Never before has the state subsidized more people with more benefits for childcare, education, health, welfare, and much more. And never before has the state been more resented and hated. The state requires recognition of its authority to survive, but by undercutting biblical faith by means of a humanistic and statist education, the state has undercut not only the authority of the family and the church, but also, and most of all, its own authority. The more the state increases its power and services, the more it diminishes its authority. The age of the state is climaxing in the crisis of the state and its authority. The only valid alternative to nihilism is a biblical faith. The Westminster Confession defines faith thus: "The grace of faith, whereby the elect are enabled to believe to the saving of their souls, is the work of the Spirit of Christ in their hearts, and is ordinarily wrought by the ministry of the Word, by which also, and by the administration of the sacraments and prayer, is increased and strengthened." Without faith, man lives in a flat, one-surface world, the world of time. Because in such a world, time itself is meaningless, and a nihilistic cynicism reduces the world to change alone, even that world is lost to man. He despises the reality around him. The man of faith lives in a world of time, against the background of eternity. Time rests in a cosmos of meaning and has implications in and from eternity. There is thus depth and perspective in such a world, and above all, meaning. Humanism, existentialist, rationalist, empiricist, etc., always ends in a nihilistic denial of and hatred for reality. It believes in nothing, past, present, or future. It holds that life is an absurd torment, and the beginning of wisdom is to believe in no truth or wisdom. Zelensky observed of the girl in the communist youth underground who held life to be absurd and pushed the idea to the limits, that this brought her to the edge of insanity and finally to the psychiatric hospital. Octobriana, page 30. Men cannot live without faith, and the collapse of false faiths is productive of strongly suicidal tendencies in modern man. The communist world is aware of this suicidal loss of faith in communism. It does everything possible to disguise and to conceal it. It cannot overcome it. The hatred for Christians, who are too helpless to be a revolutionary threat, is governed by a fanatical and vicious hatred for the hope, love, and faith which marks the believer. The most unspeakable tortures and indignities are perpetrated on Christian prisoners, as Wurmbrand and others have reported. How dare the Christians have faith when others have none? How dare the Christians hope in God rather than the dictatorship of the proletariat? And how dare they seek to bind man to man in the love of grace and the grace of godly love, when only the state should provide social cement? Here is the irony of the Soviet Empire. The well-paid nihilistic youth and intellectuals, who are the elite of the regime and live in material comfort, are going out of their minds, or are living in nihilistic despair and helplessness, whereas the brutally tortured and persecuted Christians live and pray in the assurance of God's victory. Here in the West, prayer can be backed by work, by Christian reconstruction. In every area of life, there is an urgent need to rebuild all things in terms of biblical faith. Humanists gravitate to statist action because they can only believe in starting big expenditures, big schools, big organizations. We have a generation of men who fall under God's judgment. For who hath despised the day of small things? Zechariah chapter 4, verse 10. Only as men value, honor, and work to establish small beginnings will great results ensue. The idiots of our day waste their time and money on beginning big, a national impact, a demonstration of epic proportions, and so on. They have the statist mentality, even in their hostility to the state. God's people work in terms of small beginnings and great results under God. They work in terms of reality because they work by faith, The nihilists who believe in nothing also believe in everything. By reducing all reality to nothingness, by cynicism and doubt, they make all things equally meaningless and therefore equally valuable. The door is then opened to superstition, magic, occultism, and witchcraft, as in every era of nihilism. People who believe in nothing make all allegiance a matter of taste, and their taste runs to the occult and demonic. Those whose faith is in the God of Scripture have a standard and a grasp of reality to preserve them from the superstitions of nihilism. They look for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 10. Men of faith cannot tell what the future will bring to them, but they know who brings it, and they know that God makes all things work together for good to them that love him, to them who are called according to his purpose. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. The nihilists are all around us, and they are dangerous, as are all suicidal people. But they are also futile, because they have lost their hold on reality. They are in flight from life. As against them, the people of God must stand, not in terms of the past or present, not in terms of what they like, nor in terms of conventions, but in terms of the truth, Jesus Christ. As Tertullian wrote in On the Veilings of Virgins, Christ did not call himself the conventions, but the truth. The conventions will go, the truth will endure and prevail.